And there we are. All right. So, hello everyone. Thank you for once again taking the time to join us this evening for our general meeting of the La Mesa Foothills Democratic Club. I am Mitch Wagner. I am the board member for communications and social media. Welcome again. We have a lot of ground to cover and some great speakers to hear from, so I want to get started right away. We will have opportunities for Q&A, hopefully, if technology permits us to. Please send a private message to me in the chat channel. And also you can message two of my board colleagues, Evelyn Andrade and Katie Seghetti, who have agreed, Katie just waved, hi Katie, who have agreed to act as co-hosts on this meeting. And they have ways of getting my attention, of hitting me on the side of the head virtually. So we are streaming this on YouTube as before. So if you have friends or family who can't make it tonight on Zoom, or if you experience technical difficulties and you have to leave us, you can watch on our YouTube channel. Just search for La Mesa Foothills Democratic Club on YouTube. And if you have anything you need to bring to my attention, or you notice any technical problems or anyone disrupting the meeting, oh heavens, please message either of my two board colleagues. Once again, those two excellent people are Evelyn Andrade and Katie Seghetti. They will pass the message on to me. So let's get going. I'm going to start by pressing a couple of buttons here to unmute Tina Reinberg, our club president. And she's going to say some words. Tina, how you doing? Can you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Yay. Okay.
Hi, welcome everybody. I'm so glad we're here. I wish we could be here in person, but I guess this is a good second best. I want everybody to start thinking about candidates, especially if you live in East County and you live in a smaller area. We don't need, we're very lucky. We've got great candidates for president and Congress and state assembly, but we need candidates for smaller races, school boards, city councils, planning groups, water boards, fire boards. These are very important races, and a lot of them are just being held by Republicans because no Democrat has ever run. And I think the days of the Republican free lunch is over, personally. So we're trying very hard to recruit candidates for those areas and for those kinds of races. So if you have any at all interest in that, we're going to be meeting up 2 weeks from today at the same time, and we can send invitations out. But we really, really, really want to talk to people about running and what it's like to be on these boards and what you have to do to run. So we will collect all the information that we need to give you. We're going to have volunteers to help. We just really need you to start thinking about that. Thanks. That's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Tina. So our first speaker is scheduled to be Will Rodriguez Kennedy. I don't see Will in the attendee lineups.
I'll reach out to him.
Okay, good. So our next speaker is supposedly Scott Lewis. I don't see him either. I see another person named last name Lewis, but not Scott.
He's waving, Mitch.
Oh, he's here, or
Ashley Lewis.
Oh, Ashley, you will be Scott Lewis?
Yes, sorry.
No, we're good. We're good.
Sorry about that. I used her account for something else. So
No. That's fine. We're happy to have you here. These little, a minor thing, and I'm happy. It's strange to hear your voice actually interactively because I am an adept of the Voice of San Diego podcast.
Oh, great. Thank you.
I will not ask you to do the whistling opener. However, we'll just jump right in. So to those of us who do not know Scott, he oversees the Voice of San Diego operations, its website and daily functions. He also writes about local politics, where he frequently breaks news and goes back and forth with local political figures. And of course, as I just said, hosts or co-hosts the weekly Voice of San Diego podcast. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
Go
ahead.
Go on. Okay. You guys have broken a few really good stories, in particular in the last week on Voice of San Diego. I want to ask you to start by talking about what we're seeing the schools doing with COVID reentry.
Oh, that's a a real important question to me. I've been rather obsessed with it and worried about it. I have, just so my biases are on the table, I have a 14-year-old who's come to live with us, a relative, actually my cousin, my uncle's daughter. So we were trying to get her into high school. I have a 9-year-old who's supposed to be going into 4th grade, and I have a 7-year-old who's supposed to be going into 2nd grade. So we are very invested and worried about the schools and our careers. How difficult it is for us to get through, just being a normal level of productivity while also making sure our kids don't lose traction and stuff like that. It's just been really an interesting experience. So I take it very personally and been following very closely. Basically, what's become clear is schools are in large part, very big logistical operations to make sure you can keep hundreds of kids in one place together safely. And that logistical challenge has been made extremely hard, or at least very confusing. There's not very clear guidance from the state or from the county. If you add up all the guidance, it could mean one thing. And if you just take it as, guidance, like Del Mar released a thing today saying, we're going to try to keep kids apart as practicable as possible, or whatever's practicable. I don't know what that means about it. They said they're going to require masks. There's a lot of confusion about the guidance, but then that adds just tremendous cost as well. And so there's been a lot of uncertainty about the funding. They've been demanding and requesting the national relief bills to go through. They're pursuing, at least San Diego Unified's pursuing a national lobbying strategy where they're connecting with superintendents of school districts across the country, especially in swing states with vulnerable senators, so that they can try to put pressure on those senators to pass some kind of relief bill in the Senate. Because obviously Mitch McConnell's probably not too worried about San Diego schools, but they're trying to put pressure on other ways because they really want and say they need a tremendous amount of money to even make it through this year. So school districts are basically falling into two plans. One is to try to open schools basically full time with a lot of modifications that are very costly. They don't know how they're going to pay for. And then the second is to launch some kind of online homeschooling platform for everybody that they can tap into if they're uncomfortable or for whatever reason want to choose that option. There's a few districts still dabbling with like a hybrid model where it would be a couple days or a day a week, and then still connection to that physical facility. Because I think what you're seeing disrupted is the entire like physical connection to schools. Like we have this geographic tradition of our neighborhoods being also our schools. And that's been disrupted for years as some people very uncomfortable with their neighborhood schools have pursued other options. And now that tenuous connection for some neighborhoods to their physical schools, I think has been disrupted and maybe disrupted permanently for people. And I'm not sure how different communities will respond to that. I know we go to our traditional neighborhood school. My cousin who's now living with us will go to the neighborhood school. And so what we're dealing with is just a lot of uncertainty about a third option that seems to be coming up for San Diego Unified, which is that you'll basically be homeschooling, but you can come in sometimes, and they're not sure about the sometimes. So I think it's really odd to be every day hearing about bars and restaurants, and I know that there's so many jobs and other things related to those issues. But it's really hard to hear them discussed when the very core function of what our kids will do every day has not been resolved, and until it is, there will be a crippling effect on the broader economy indefinitely. And now with the spikes, and you hear about people catching the disease in restaurants, and it really kind of makes you get a little frustrated because we got to get schools open. That should be the number one priority, I think, or at least top priority for recovery efforts. And I'm really concerned about how little attention and obsession it's getting from leaders outside the school districts who are working obviously extremely hard to figure out this puzzle. So you tapped into one there.
Yeah, as you have pointed out, just from a sheer immediate economic standpoint, forgetting all the arguably larger issues,
Yeah, I
Parents
mean,
can't go back to work if their kids aren't going to school.
yeah, and a lot of people have been patching together lives that are really difficult to maintain. So hopefully they'll find some relief.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, you also had a story. I thought it was a very well written first paragraph about how, while activists are arguing to cut police budgets, the state is cutting school budgets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about, yeah, what's going on with that?
Well, the state did come through with rather significant, I think, budget. They also did something that is actually a little bit controversial. I think that their school budget was very well received for a lot of things, but one of the areas that was interesting is they did decide another issue that schools were dealing with, which was that they get funded per pupil who attends. And there was, there's a really good chance that 10, 20, 30% of students don't go back to the same school anymore. And so they were also looking at the possibility of a massive funding shortfall from the, the lack of attendance or the switching to a charter school or some other options that might change the dynamics. So what the legislature did, from what I understand, is put in place that they'll be funded based on what they had last year in attendance, which was a huge relief for them, but also may present some real challenges for where students do end up if they end up on charter school platforms, or if they've gone to a school that's just opened up, it doesn't have history with that funding. Those are interesting questions that come up. I think that the state can say that it did fund, but I think there was a lot of really interesting things that happened last month with a lot of people who are conscious about the national political atmosphere and national political discussions and international grievances and problems. And I think that they were really they were very conscious of that, and suddenly they were conscious of their local government when it came to this reckoning we've seen in the streets about systemic racism across the country. And I think that they took that consciousness that they have and took it to local governments where they were ready to make, they wanted to see a difference immediately. And that was really special to watch. There was a lot of vitriol and stuff, but underneath it was a real interesting mobilization. And we had a conversation on our channel with Georgette Gomez, and there were hundreds of people participating and commenting, and I didn't recognize a single one of their names. And so I think there was a confusion about these issues, like why police budgets were going up while they were at the same time hearing about school budgets being either cut or restrained. And so I think that was an injustice that we can all understand, and I guess the word is grok, really feel, but help them understand how they can be part of about influencing these discussions going forward is going to be a real challenge, I think, for the entire infrastructure of local civic engagement and media.
Yeah, I did. That leads to a good segue to our next topic, which is police reforms.
Yeah.
Now, tragically, do I understand correctly that the gentleman who was shot this weekend downtown passed away today, or did I misread that?
Yeah, there was a rather remarkable weekend of a police-involved shooting. Officers killed a man in the end, shot him, and there was a lot of obvious tension about that immediately. And the police chief showed up on scene, and they did. I think I've never seen them mobilize to release footage that fast. Obviously, they should really refrain from releasing stills or other, perspective shaping evidence from the beginning. They should present their case in a more full version. But I suppose we should applaud the steps they've taken to transparency. And I think that helped the community understand some of what was going on. But we need to not have customized approach to public transparency. We need to have very clear policies and rules about when we're going to release things as soon as they come together, triggers or something that allows us to understand, what it's going to be applied to in every single situation. And so I think that there's a lot of movement on that right now. In a different world, the Republicans would be looking at people trying to question the funding of a government operation that has lost public trust. And they would be saying like, hey, we have, we've talked about that for years, but, I'm not seeing that mobilization on that side. And instead, there are a lot of young, very anti-authoritarian people ready to challenge everything we've understood about policing and about this experience they're having in the streets. And it's really, it's there's been a few minor things, but what a special experience, historic experience to be watching. And so I think that, they're coming in with a lot of questions about why we're doing the thing, why people in City Hall have been doing the things they've been doing. Why are police raises on the table right now? Is that really what should be done? And obviously there's reasons for all of these things, but it's sometimes really healthy to have a new group of different people from different backgrounds come in and say, what are you doing? What are you doing? And why are you doing it this way? And I find it fascinating. So one of the things we're watching, they did approve the enhanced commission for the ballot measure that would allow for an independent investigative work of what the police have done. It would allow for subpoena power, and it would give them their independent attorney so that they can really do their own work to figure out what's going on with misconduct issues. And that'll be on the ballot. And I don't know it'll have much opposition or organized opposition. And so, that's a real change from a year ago. Like if you would have told me a year ago that this would be sailing through like that, I wouldn't believe you. So yeah, things are happening, but I don't think it's near enough for the people.
Okay, so I've got time for one more question here, and it's arguably the lighter side of the news.
Yeah.
The East County race between Poway Mayor Steve Vowse and former state Senator Joel Anderson.
Yeah.
The Republicans are trying to run to the left on this one, and Jeff Benish, who organizes these meetings and is the mastermind behind the scenes, emailed me about that, and I went, what? Because it wasn't a story. So tell us about that.
Well, I got interesting feedback right after that about the sheer conservatism of a couple or fanaticism on different issues that might be worth following up with. But yeah, they looked at the 27% that Kenya Taylor got in the race. It overlaps a little bit with San Diego borders. There's probably 30% of people who would identify as maybe anti-Trump Democrats and maybe not, I don't know, liberals or something. And yeah, they see that, and they see that as a differentiator. And Joel Anderson's eager to make the case. He's worked with Nathan Fletcher before on various pieces of legislation, and Steve Vos will make the case that Nathan Fletcher's had as much success as he's had on the county, in part because he's had the support of Diane Jacob, and guess who Diane Jacob supports? Steve Vos. So I think that there's a really interesting, they're trying to make some sort of connection, and I would bet, I wouldn't even be surprised if one of them wanted Nathan Fletcher's endorsement, and he's probably going to stay out of that. But I think that they're both, Anderson has the actual support of the Republican Party and has a lot of those things going, but Vos has everybody else, and it's kind of a fun little race to watch.
Yeah.
They're pretty mean to each other too. It's going to be really, really mean.
Yeah, there was one comment in the article, I may have misread it, but it appeared that one Republican was saying that Mayor Vos couldn't win because he wore a cowboy hat, and liberals hate cowboy hats.
Yeah. See, and I grew up around cowboy hats my whole childhood, and so that was personally offensive, but whatever.
All right, on that sartorial note, I will bid you farewell and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad so many people are involved, and you always have a great club anytime.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so I have asked our first speaker, Will Rodriguez Kennedy, who is actually our second speaker now, and he is unmuted. Hello, Will.
Hey, how you doing?
Okay, how are you? That was going to be my first question. How's your health these days following your little medical adventure?
Yeah, adventure. I'm doing pretty well. I had obviously, for those of you who know, I was hospitalized for a significant amount of time. I think the total time I spent I spent 6 days in ICU and 13 days in the hospital in general. And so it took a good 2 months to recover from that. And I'm still probably not 100%. I still have like some way to go in terms of restoring breathing capacity, but I'm feeling really good. So
good. On a personal note, and this will make me sound horribly self-centered, but you may not remember this and you don't even know part of it, but I think the very last time I went out and socialized with people was after our last live meeting in March, and you and I were sitting side by side so close we were bumping elbows. So when I heard the news 3 weeks later, my concern with your well-being was vying with my concern for my own. So
fair enough. I think the entirety of the media was concerned about their well-being, because just weeks before that, I had given a bunch of interviews. We had our primary party. Like, it was there. I think I spoke in very close quarters with the entire media establishment of San Diego and the political establishment as well.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, glad to see your well for your own sake, not just for mine. Speaking of that big topic that's on all of our minds all the time, how do we support candidates through these restrictions? All of our members of the club here, what can we do?
Well, there's a million things that there's a couple things that we can do, I should say. There are a lot of priorities that we have to talk about as we move towards a campaign that will be executed under COVID-19 conditions. First of all, the party is preparing for both eventualities. So we already know what a campaign looks like if we did not have COVID-19, but we have to prepare for the reality with COVID-19 looming over us. And it does look that we are regressing in terms of our progress as a state and as a county in terms of the infections and the amount of people who are testing positive. So what we are able to do, there are a couple of things that are pretty immediate. One thing is that the party is actively, and I'll send a series of resources so that everyone in the club knows, but the party is actively doing one thing, for example, wellness checks. And actually some of the candidates are doing it as well. And what it is that we're basically checking with our voters. It's a low persuasion effort where we're just reminding them that the party and our candidates care. We're calling, and then we'll slip in a mention about who's running and things like that. But the focus is to make sure that people know that we're not just here to get their votes, but also to check in on them and see if we can connect them with resources, but also to remind them an election's coming at some point. In addition to that, we will be doing we'll have to shift our campaign effort to not only away from canvassing into a lot of calls, a lot of texting, and a lot of targeted digital. And so we actually have been seeing this sort of advent of these new technologies in order to get to our slate into voters' hands and to increase their awareness of our candidates. We've seen it tested in 2018, which we saw a great sort of case study of how effective targeted digital can be done. Also, a new form of campaign organizing called distributed organizing, which is where we geotag basically all of our activists and then connect them with the people nearest to them, which is very similar to the Go Team model, except it also uses your own networks in order to make sure that we're targeting people and sort of distributing the effort of reaching out to Democrats. So we'll be doing.
So I would be calling my actual physical neighbors.
Your physical neighbors.
This is Mitch around the corner, and
your physical neighbors and people within your network that we may not have ID. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's distributed organizing. That's basically the model for the Go Team, except through calls and texts and emails. So we'll be doing a lot of that. That model was actually championed in 2016, and a sort of it's a new effort to reach out to voters, and it was untested but very successfully tested in 2018 when the Democrats when we took the control of the House of Representatives. So that will be done, and we'll be sending out information about that as soon as those technologies and techniques are available. But it's going to be a lot of calls. It's going to be a lot of texts. For the people who are targeted through text, it's going to be a lot of emails. It's going to be targeted digital. Now that we're all staying home and we're watching Netflix and we're watching YouTube and Hulu and all that stuff, we have the ability to target our voters through their viewing habits. So we can purchase ads through Netflix or Facebook or YouTube or Hulu or Instagram and target our voters that way as well. So now also with our Facebook ads, we can actually upload our voter rolls and be able to target the actual voters and their Facebook accounts in a way that hasn't been possible until the last election. So the advent of these new technologies will allow us to diversify the way we connect with our voters, and then there will have to be a determination about whether or not it's safe to do lit drops, or if we just shift to mail. So that is how the campaign will have to change. But to be honest, we are prepared for this. The technology has been tested. We've used it quite successfully in the last election, and there are a lot of vendors that are going to be able, and a lot of people who can easily call and text from home and email from home. So that's how the campaign changes from a canvassing effort to a digital/distributed organized campaign.
Okay, so how can we recruit Democrats to run for these East County Republican held seats on school boards and planning boards and all the local offices? That needs to really be a priority for us here, I think. What can we do?
Absolutely. So as those of you know, there are, I think, between 300 and 400 races that are up for election in this cycle. The party has never endorsed that many candidates, and we have to, and you know,
Actually, I'm going to interrupt you. Three or 400 races in the state?
In this county.
In the county? Okay.
Yes. The party on a slow year will endorse between 150 and 250 races. So this cycle only, there are, I think, between 800 and 1,000 in total seats in San Diego County. Now, it's important to note that's everything from planning boards that are elected to school boards to water boards, irrigation districts, those types of special districts. So I can announce that one of the things that the party has done is we've started a partnership with an organization called Contest Every Race, which is going to do a text and call campaign to recruit Democrats for every single school board race. They've done the research in order to make sure and identified our base voters and people in the community. And then those names will eventually circle up to the clubs and they'll let us know if someone's interested. And then we can filter them to our training or to the clubs to make sure that they know that this is how you run and whatnot. So that effort is well, I just made the partnership, I think yesterday. So that effort should be, I have to approve something by the 2nd, and so that they can make communications on our behalf, and they are doing it at cost. There's no cost to us. They are doing it as a volunteer effort, and it's something that they have been launching throughout the state. So that's for school board races. Now we're going to need some help with the water boards and the special districts. There is a concerted effort by members in the labor community in terms of organizing on water districts, and a lot of that organizing, and we've already given the list to Tina and Chris in terms, I believe, and if we haven't, let me know, because I believe we did, the list for the seats that are available, including which ones we have incumbents and whatnot. So we are going to do our best to contest every race. That's the goal. But there are a lot of races, and a lot of them have a small population from which to grab to recruit from. But it's important. It is one of the highest priorities we have as a party.
Okay, so do you see a return to more traditional campaigning and fundraising, door to door, and more in-person events before November?
I don't think so. I have to be very real. That I think, and my perception of this may be biased by the fact that the illness almost killed me, but it's important to note that this is a very serious illness, and we have to make sure that we are very cognizant of the advice from medical professionals who believe that this illness could, or the restrictions could be required up into the late summer and early fall, and possibly beyond. I think it's something that we're going to have to talk about at some point, is that even if we do start going back to in-person events in the late fall, the way we do that will be different. I think the mask wearing and the social distancing is now, or at least for the near future, is going to be a facet of how we engage with other humans, even beyond the stay-at-home orders. So that will be interesting to see how that executes. And even afterwards, the party will probably have to invest in making sure that our volunteers and staff have personal protective equipment, maybe face masks and maybe the shields that we can have made or ordered in order to make sure that we protect the safety of not only our volunteers and staff, but also our voters, many of which could be at risk.
Okay, so we're jumping around a little bit, but I want to come back to the topic of candidate recruitment for my last question to you. Make the case, if you would please, why somebody who's sitting on this meeting right now in the audience and has never run for office before, why should they do so?
Sure. Someone once told me that oftentimes the decisions that are made in our democracy are really decided by the people who show up. And it's really surprising to know how much power some of these boards and small city councils have, and more so even than some of the more sexier races, the Congress or state assembly. A city council can reach out and touch you in ways that are very impactful and even more impactful than President of the United States. And these seats are really important because the people who are sitting on these boards are often not representative of their communities. And so when people who are thinking about running or who are interested in policy and things like that, but like self-select themselves out, what they allow is people from industry and people from businesses that are associated with these government bodies to rule the day. And so you have decisions in which, for example, in water or fire boards, where the decisions more reflect the industry around those boards, as opposed to what the people might want. And so that's important that we when you see those interests, when you have those policies interests and you want to change in your community, that you put your hand out. Now, it's also important to be realistic and also to not, and by realistic, I mean not to have unrealistic goals. Like, in order to make this work, one, you have to run, right? But two, you also have to have the realization that there may be other people running, and not to get to make that into a toxic conflict or whatever, but also to make sure that if you run for something, that you have some sort of connection to that community, and not that you just moved into the district and you want to run or something like that. So those are important things to consider. And it's also important to note, and I would put a strong emphasis that there is a huge underrepresentation in terms of the people who sit on these boards. There is, in the 400 seats that we have up for election, that could be up for election this cycle, I think we have one Black candidate who is male and a few who are female. That is a huge problem in terms of the diversity that is reflected in the leadership of our communities. And so it's absolutely important that we encourage people from the Black community, the Indigenous community, the Latino community, and other communities of color.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Will. I'm glad to see you're healthy. Please stay that way. And our next speaker is Assemblymember Todd Gloria. And I'm going to, oh, you're unmuted yourself. Very good, sir. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Mitch. Thank you so much for having me. And hello, fellow Democrats. I want to thank Jeff for his help in getting me here. And Mitch, kudos to you running a great interview here. I think Smolens or Lewis should hire you. You're doing a great job of getting some good questions and some great answers. I want to first off just commend our party chair. Will is, as you all know, not highly compensated for what he does on our behalf, but he does a tremendous amount of work. And Will, we appreciate you, and particularly as Mitch was saying, we're grateful that you're healthy and back to work on our behalf. It's a big year, and we need you. We need you at the helm of our party. So thank you for what you do, Will. To my fellow Democrats, thank you all for letting me join you. I know that you have a heavy agenda tonight, as you always do, and you have great attendance, as always. I always look forward to the full auditorium, but you got a great full Zoom as well, and that is really incredible. And I just want to congratulate the club on its level of participation. It gives candidates like me hope that we will all do well as a ticket in November, from the top, where we obviously need to make a change, to these local school boards, water boards, planning groups. Mitch, you didn't ask me the question, but if I can just take up the question you asked Will there, I would highly encourage folks to consider running for office. It is not without its challenges. You will get to know the joys of non-agenda public comment and other opportunities like that. But ultimately, particularly in times like this where money's tight and our priorities are threatened, we need good Democrats to come forward and serve. And so I hope any of you who might be considering would listen to your better angels and step forward and take on that opportunity. I ran for local office. It was so good that I'm coming back to try and do it again. And so I think that there's a tremendous value in serving in local government. If I may, we have not seen each other since the primary, and a lot has happened, obviously, in those months since March. But I'm pleased to remind you that our campaign in the primary had an incredible result, where we won the election by 65,000 more votes than the second place candidate, winning 85% of the precincts in the city of San Diego. And because I'm talking to the Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club, I want to point out that we won all the precincts in Del Cerro, San Carlos, Allied Gardens. As you might remember, Councilmember Scott Sherman was running in the primary election, and the fact that we were able to outpoll him in his own council district may say a thing or two about me, but I also think it says a lot about this club and the organizing that you all have been doing for such a long time to make sure that Democrats are organized, they know who our endorsed candidates are, and that they turn up at the polls. And so I'm deeply appreciative to all of you, not just for what you did in the primary, but what you've been doing for years and years to build the number of Democratic registrants and actual voters that got that great result for us. Obviously, we're now moving on to the November election with, I think, a fair amount of momentum. But of course, what we're dealing with is a very different campaign than what we had in the primary. Will was speaking to this. Mitch, you were asking these questions. You know, we certainly find ourselves only a few days after the primary election, dealing immediately with a public health crisis. We, of course, in the weeks after are now dealing with an economic crisis. And of course, in the last month or so, dealing with a significant racial justice crisis. And so just a quick little bit with the Assembly hat, talk a little bit about the candidacy, and then throw it to you, Mitch, for questions that you may have. But quickly, from the state's perspective, I heard you asking questions about the state budget. Last Friday, we put the finishing touches on our new state budget, which took effect today. Happy new fiscal year, everybody. It's July 1st. That's what our fiscal year starts. And it is true. We went from having a $9 billion surplus before the pandemic to now a $54 billion deficit that we had to solve for. And the discussion that you were having a moment ago with Scott Lewis was around education. And the governor's initial budget proposal envisioned fairly significant reductions to both education and to healthcare and social services. And as you mentioned, Mitch, it's kind of critical for the economy to reopen and people to return to work, for our schools to be reopened. And so the legislature negotiated hard with the governor to try and limit as much of those cuts as is possible. I think we ended up with a better result than what was proposed initially by the governor after the pandemic hit. I know that our local school district is maybe not satisfied, because obviously all of us wish we weren't in this position, but certainly the resources they're being provided allows them to have the conversations they're having now about what reopening looks like. And while many of us don't know what that will ultimately look like, we at least know the state has made a major investment in really trying to keep schools from dealing with the brunt of our $54 billion deficit. Same is true for public health. You know, eliminating or reducing various healthcare programs didn't seem wise to do during a pandemic. And so Democrats worked together to limit those reductions. I think many of those reductions, a lot of you know, are often penny wise, but pound foolish. When we reduce in-home supportive care services for seniors and the disabled, it does not mean they still need care. It often means that if they can't get that care in their home, they have to get it in skilled nursing facilities that actually are more expensive to taxpayers. And that's why we fought so hard to make sure those reductions did not happen. The question was asked about where public safety falls in all this. And I think it went perhaps underreported that this state budget envisions closing 2 state prisons, the first time that anyone can remember doing that. And I think that that's a testament to the criminal justice reforms that our state has passed, both in the legislature and with the vote of Californians in multiple elections, that we have the capacity now to maintain those who need to be held in custody with fewer institutions. And so we think that's going to be a tremendous savings to taxpayers in the years to come. This is not going to be easy. The governor set out this goal when he was elected, and this budget gets us closer to accomplishing that. But again, I think underreported in the context of obviously a lot of reporting going on relative to whatever the president said that was crazy this week or this minute, to obviously the economic recession, the global pandemic, and so on and so forth. Probably the biggest thing I've been working on is unemployment. I've recognized that many of you may be personally impacted. Maybe your spouse or your children or your grandchildren are impacted. Just by little statistic, my office received a 20-fold increase in the number of constituents seeking assistance with unemployment claims. We're currently assisting roughly 1,200 San Diegans with their unemployment claims. These are people who've already applied for unemployment, have been so frustrated that they've reached out to their elected official. And I know that this is also true for Dr. Weber, Lorena Gonzalez, Tony Atkins. All of us have an avalanche of these cases, and we're doing our level best to advocate for these folks to get the benefits they're entitled to. And I just want you to know that I'm very frustrated by this process. Yes, many have received their benefits, but there are many that have not. And we, of course, are now in the, fourth month of this pandemic, and 4 months without income coming in the door is catastrophic for families that need to make the rent. Like today, it's the first of the month, rent is due. And if they're owed unemployment, but they can't get the benefit, that's frustrating. And I would just give you, while I have 1,200 cases and don't need more cases, I would say it is our responsibility. We are the customer service department for the state. So if you are personally impacted and you live in the 78th district, please call my office. If you're in Dr. Weber's district, please call hers. Allow us to serve you, to be advocates. We can't get a positive result in every case, but in many cases we can get some progress. And this is where I shout out to my staff who've been working overtime trying to deal with all of these claims. Lastly, I just maybe transition a bit to what's going on. You know, on the police reform obviously has taken a heightened priority. I would argue before it was a priority. Last year, California passed Dr. Weber's AB 392, which is landmark legislation around use of force in California. We went from one of the, I think, more regressive states to one of the most progressive states when it comes to this issue of when an officer is allowed to use deadly force. We're continuing that work this year. I'm a co-author of legislation to ban carotid restraints in California. Obviously, a lot of San Diego's law enforcement has already done that, but there are other jurisdictions across the state that haven't. This legislation would force those jurisdictions to comply. I'm also a co-author of legislation that would allow the Attorney General of California to investigate officer-involved shootings and use of force in communities. Again, places like San Diego, where we have had some citizen review and we are likely to have even greater citizen review after the November election. This will help in communities where they don't have that same level of oversight. Lastly, in the case of the mayor's race, and I'll wrap up, Mitch, and I'm sure you have questions, is, campaigning does look a bit different, but one of the things I'm focused on, many of you know I'm a policy nerd. It's really important to me that we're advancing progressive, important policy. You saw me do a minimum wage and paid sick days ordinance when I was on the city council, our landmark climate action plan. I've convened a group, task force, if you will, that we've named Back to Work San Diego. It is co-chaired by Congressman Scott Peters and by Paula Avila of the Chamber of Commerce. We have everyone from Supervisor Nathan Fletcher to State Treasurer Fiona Ma, Alan Ginn, who's many people's favorite economist locally, all working with me to try and figure out what a blueprint for keeping San Diego safe in the pandemic, but reopening our economy and getting people back to work. My hope is to have a blueprint of ideas that we can show the public that would say what my administration would hope to do if we're fortunate enough to be elected in November and take office in December. We want to make sure that the economic toll of this is minimized as much as possible. Obviously, there'll be impacts, but San Diegans need to get back to work. Small businesses need help. And I think we can create a strategy to do that more effectively. Hopefully hit the ground running on day one. Many of you have seen me lead the city through a recession, through a political crisis before. I believe I have the experience to do it again, and I'm hopeful to earn that support from the voters of San Diego in November. With your help, I believe we can make history in November by electing me to the mayor's office. So thank you so much for letting me give you that quick update. Mitch, take it away with any questions you have.
All right, you've pretty much covered everything. And well, it was extraordinary. Part of my brain was going, I should ask him some questions. And I'm like, other part is going, he's going fine. Let him keep going. So, all right. Thank you very much for joining us.
My absolute pleasure.
And we're going to move on to our next speaker now. Our next speaker is Laura Fink. Let's see, Laura is here. Yay, unmute yourself, please, Laura. See if I need to do that. Nope, I'm not the one who does that. Laura, only you have the power to unmute yourself. We'll give Laura a couple more seconds and then we'll move on. All right, Laura is either fumbling with buttons on her computer, which is a place I have been many times myself, or has possibly stepped away from her desk. We'll move on to Chris Ward. We'll come back to Laura if we can. Chris Ward is here. Chris, please unmute yourself. I have pressed the Ask to Unmute button. Ah, there you are.
I'm muted. Well, Mitch, thank you so much. It's really good to be with you all. I see so many friends on here. Hello, Councilmember Colin Parent. Hi, Todd. Good to see you. And I know you're working hard for us up in Sacramento. My colleague Jen Campbell online. Our chair, Will Kenny Rodriguez. Good friends Linda, Tina, Jeff, so many people. And Todd's right. A record attendance as we expect out of this club. Thank you all for being with us. Want to talk about a couple things that are happening at the city right now because, gosh, it's been a lot on our plate over the last couple of months.
Actually, I'm going to stop you for a second. For those who don't know your name, which is possible, you are a San Diego City Council member. You represent the district. Which district is it again, please?
District 3.
District 3.
So we have downtown and North Park, and Todd's like, our favorite district. So we love all of our districts, but we got a lot of action happening.
And you are candidate Assembly 78.
And that's right,
78.
and candidate for Assembly District 78. I want to speak on that for a second, but most importantly, some of the work in hand. Are we coming in a little fuzzy for you? Mitch, you're coming in fuzzy for me.
You sound fine to me.
Okay. Well, let me talk about a big action that the city council took this week, and that was on renter relief, because we've got a lot of things that we need to be doing to help people impacted by COVID-19. And one thing that I was really dogged on when I saw in April that the city was afforded, only the city of San Diego at the time, a really generous gift from the federal government for the CARES Act funding. And knowing that we received $250 million, I wanted to make sure that we were making responsible and quick decisions that got that money to the people that need it the most, the families that are struggling the most. So we proposed a rental relief program that took its time to get up and running, but through some budget actions recently got funded. And I'm grateful for actually a unanimous vote from City Council this week that actually got that up and running in our Housing Commission. The long and the short, so we have about 15 million to work with. It was far short of what I initially hoped for, but I'll take what I can get because the demand is really deep out there. The desperation is really dire. And we want to make sure that families that are of low income or very low income status, who are at risk of homelessness, have the support they need because they lost their job. They lost their only source of income. Maybe they don't have Section 8, they can't qualify for other funding, and they need to pay the rent. And so it's been good that we've been able to also get eviction moratoriums passed and also extended forward. That was another action we took this week to actually extend that moratorium through September 30th. That only passed on a 5-4 vote. We've got a little bit of dissension starting to rise on council. So Democrats need to hold the line on that, and we will. But it is important that we make sure that we're using our resources to be able to help those people pay the rent so that whenever this ends, hopefully sooner rather than later, fewer families will be left with a huge bill. And we got a lot of work to do because there's a lot more in this space to try to reconcile all of the renter-landlord transactions that really need some attention. On homeless programs. So I think, I still serve as the chair of our regional task force on the homeless. And when COVID hit and we activated our emergency operations center as a city, I wanted to make sure that we had a sub-branch dedicated to homeless response, because we remember acutely in the region the hepatitis A crisis, and to not repeat many of those mistakes, we needed leadership to make sure we were focusing on the most vulnerable populations. And we knew that many of our shelters that were doing their best to get people into housing were also too dense, that the clusters of individuals in there were leaving themselves susceptible to transmission of the virus, not practicing social distance guidelines. So we also at the same time had a very large public facility, our convention center, that was completely canceled. All the conventions had gone away, and we have this large floor plate that maybe we should do something a little bit better with to solve the immediate needs of the community. And so we realigned many of those programs into the convention center, and actually were able to get a net total of 800 individuals expanded to more than 1,300 individuals. And with the same level of service and the same level of personnel, we're able to help more people and get more off of the streets. And they're not stuck there. We're working so hard right now actively on exit strategies to make sure people get into housing. And as of last week's data, I get information every week, we actually have gotten 240 individuals out of the convention center and into housing spaces. And that's opened up 240 beds, and we get more into the system. And it's not just a place to rest. It connects you with housing specialists, with public health nurses, with getting into our information system that actually connects people to the resources that they need. These are all positive steps. And so we're going to stay the course on that. We're looking at motel acquisitions and other strategies to try to help more people en masse. Of course, we've got a lot happening in our police department and police community relations. We're looking forward to a measure coming forward that will reform our Citizens Review Board into a commission that can overview practices as well. That also passed council and is moving forward to one more vote coming up in July. And so much is going on. Completing the SDSU city transaction to be able to sell that parcel of land in Mission Valley is going to open up a whole new opportunity and vision, long-term vision for that campus extension that many of us are going to see, not just the housing and the student benefits, but the economic benefits of more trained individuals for our community. We've got an energy franchise agreement coming up to the city in about the next 1 to 3 months. It'll probably have a stop at Councilmember Campbell's committee soon and the Environment Committee, but this is the first time in 50 years that we've had a chance to go back and open up the terms of making sure that we've got a good energy agreement with some provider. And of course, that is going to be coupled with the work that we're doing in concert with the city of La Mesa on San Diego Community Power, on community choice. So there's a lot happening in the environment space. We have 10 ballot measures in the city of San Diego that are still moving forward through the process, from school board reforms to working at looking at a targeted focus for the height limit in the Midway area. So that's around the sports arena part of the Midway Community Plan area. And I mentioned the Citizens Review Board on police practices, and a housing bond that I've been championing for some time now, that we're also really hoping to hold on to 6 votes, because we're going to need 6 votes to put it on the ballot. And that will give San Diegans the choice for $900 million of local funding that we can couple with state and other resources to build more affordable housing here in the city of San Diego. So a lot on our plate, but you're right. I am looking forward to what's coming up in November. We're starting to get back on the horse. We've been doing our job and trying to make sure we're working in local government, but we do have the election coming up in just 4 months' time. So 4 months is when ballots hit. 5 months, the election will be over. And I'm so excited for the primary result to achieve more than 56% of the voters' faith in a multi-candidate field to be your next assembly member, representing the 78th Assembly District, to follow Assemblymember Gloria, because the issues, of course, have magnified. We talked a lot in the primary about climate change, about homelessness, about affordable housing, many of the same priorities that I'm already working on in the city of San Diego. But of course, so much has risen up to the top on jobs and economic development, on education. I have a kindergartner and I have a child in childcare who's been out of childcare, and we're trying our best to keep our family together and sane during these times. But we've got a lot of stressors on San Diego families and on our broader community to make sure that these systems are receiving the state support that they need to be safe, most importantly, and to be highly functional, and to really give students and our future generation the quality education that they need. Healthcare access, the state budget. I mean, the work really goes on and on. But Todd was really keen to point in on one point, and that is constituent services. Making sure, and I think many of you remember, I worked with Senator and then Assemblymember Marty Block during the Great Recession, and the work that we had to do to help people with unemployment, to help people prevent home foreclosures, and other resources that the state can be able to do to make sure that they're weathering the times. This is critical work for your state legislators and their district staff to make sure that we are actually availing all of the connections. And if there's a trouble getting through that 800 number, that we're working the back channels to make sure that people actually get their applications approved and get the resources that they need. So a lot on our plate. I am excited for the job. I'm ready for it. I'm not done with this job. We certainly have a lot to look forward to, and I'm looking forward to your questions. But it's just been a very consuming time, but I get up every day just kind of knowing the demands that are out there, and that's all the more reason why I think it's so much more important that we are electing good people, we're electing great Democrats, and we're sending them into office to do the good work, because it's probably been never more of a critical time that we are empowering people through public office to be able to try to meet our community's needs. So thank you for the time, and it's really great to be on your agenda tonight. I'm looking forward to a few questions if you have any.
Yeah, we have time for 1 or 2 questions. So day one, if you win the assembly race, day one on taking office, what are your priorities at that point? immediately.
I really
not long
do
term.
want to take a lot of the homelessness work that I've been doing. You know, when I started this 4 years ago, to be honest, I didn't know a whole lot other than what we talked about together. I studied national best practices. I made sure that many of our systems were reforming and conforming to those. So we still have a lot of work to do in the state. When I look at other parts of the state, like Los Angeles and the Bay Area, that are continuing to see a very drastic rise in homelessness, especially in these times when we have economic pressures that might render more people into homelessness. How do we make our programs perform well so that they're focused on the ultimate goal, getting people out of homelessness and preventing more from falling in? So I think through my role as the regional task force chair, I've got a lot to be able to guide state decision makers and colleagues on better practices that will result in a net benefit for the state of California.
Okay, great. And I think we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Okay, our next speaker is Laura Fink. I'm showing your microphone is live and you're ready to go.
Can y'all hear me?
Yay! Yay, we did it. Probably my fault. I tend to be cursed.
Oh, you and me both.
Technology.
I hear you.
Okay, so Laura is, for those who don't know Laura, she is a political analyst, a noted political analyst, and you may know her from national television, radio, print, the LA Times, Washington Post, Bloomberg News, Huffington Post, and more. So I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about national issues for a moment. What does your crystal ball say about who Joe Biden's going to pick for vice president?
Oh, you're going to start with the beefsteaks. Well, Mitch, first of all, don't let me forget to talk about the Amar Campanjar race out in your neck of the woods. But to get to, I mean, I'll just be direct. I know that predictions are so 2016. And it's very uncool to make them, but I've been uncool since high school, so I'm just gonna continue the trend. I think Kamala Harris is really the top candidate. And I think, you know, and I see some claps and some boos here, but I think that she is a woman of the moment. You learn a ton on the campaign trail, and she has really sharpened her skills as a candidate by going onto the national stage and actually doing quite well. I think that her, like many of the women on the campaign trail for president this year, her campaign was prematurely ended in a way that, you know, maybe some of the men didn't face due to obstacles. Maybe some of the men didn't face. And so I think she would be a tremendous candidate. I think she can speak very eloquently on criminal justice reform. And I know that progressives on the Horn may not feel like her record is perfect, but she knows the levers, she knows the system, and she has spent her career working to create change as in many ways as fast as she thought possible given the political circumstances. And I think that's important because we have a really unique political moment, and we need someone that can take it by the reins, the activism and all of the things that we're seeing in America right now, and harness it in a productive way once in office. And so to me, that person is Kamala Harris. A ton of other great candidates. I could be wrong, but I think she would make a great vice president.
Okay, so talk about Amar Campanjar's race, please. What's your insight there?
So Roxana Popescu, who I don't know, she was a local journalist for a long time, and she called me kind of out of the blue and said, I'm doing some freelance work for the Washington Post. This was maybe a week ago, it got published, and we worked together a couple weeks back. And she was asking me to comment on the race. And you all know this race inside and out. And so I was trying to think about, what can I tell Roxana that she doesn't already know? It's a very conservative district. Amar Campanjar is a tremendously talented candidate that has succeeded and has come close in the past. The absence, of course, of a hunter on the ballot kind of creates a dynamic that district hasn't seen in decades. So what new can I contribute? And so I talked to her about some of the dynamics, but then I started calling around after I got off the interview, because it was one of those interviews where I felt like, God, did I really add value? Did I really get, no searing insights, I thought. So I was talking to a few friends of mine, and I thought, okay, so it's R+11, R+12 is the delta on the registration out in that district. So I'm like, I just need some data here. When was the last time, like how often do Democrats, assuming Amar has the wind at his back, which it looks like, right now on the national scene, he may, because of Trump's unpopularity. But how often do Democrats win in double-digit districts where they have a registration disadvantage? And I went back to 2018, and luckily I called a friend of mine who just happened to have an Excel spreadsheet with the Cook political report spread out. And he looked at all of the pickups in 2018, all of them. And I feel like there were like 4 or 5, but he was like, he knocked them out. He sent me the spreadsheet. And I was like, okay. So in 2018, in a midterm election, where we didn't have an unpopular president at the top of the ticket, we picked up at least 4 seats. And there were a few more that were like 9, 8, 7. 4 seats that were in double-digit Republican-held districts. So that gave me a little bit of hope. So I wanted to share that insight with you for those of you that may feel like, you know, you're political realists and Amar can't take the seat for X, Y, or Z reason. You know, we political prognosticators sometimes can be a little cynical. So that's my slice for you. That's my original slice on Amar's race out in the 50th.
So your basic perspective is that in 2018, when President Trump was stronger than he is today, a lot of Democrats basically managed to overthrow Republican incumbents who looked strong?
Who looked strong and who were in districts that were decidedly Republican. By had double-digit registration advantages and were able to overcome them. So I think he definitely needs all the things going for him. I mean, we all do on these tight races, but that's what sort of gave me hope. We've done it before. Not only have we done it, we've done it 4 times recently in a midterm when we didn't even have presidential turnout. Yeah.
So shifting gears a bit, what is your perspective on California's COVID response?
Gosh, so I'm going to tell all my through the lens of media response. Like you've got people that are deeper on the policy than me on this call coming up and before me. But it was interesting because CBS called me the other day, like 2 weeks ago, and was like, "Do you think that Newsom is feeling political pressure to reopen?" And my knee-jerk response was, no, because political pressure means you're up for re-election or you're closed or you're suffering, you're on the bubble with your popularity, all the sort of, traditional markers of what political pressure looks like. And now looking back, I think I might revise my answer. I mean, I might say, yeah, I think he was under some political pressure by the business community and others to reopen. I mean, I'm the type of person that goes to the doctor when I catch a slight dark spot on the back of my hand. So I'm a little paranoid when it comes to this, but I just couldn't understand how little we knew about the virus. And yet we were opening bars and I live near the East Village and I know young people and I just was like, people were out and about and I saw it. And so internally, I think it's much harder politically to keep things closed, especially with the lack of national response. I mean, if we had a national response that was getting money to small businesses and families that really needed it so we could weather the storm in the short term for that long-term benefit of opening a safe, healthy economy, it leaves Governor Newsom in an unenviable position. But I think we should have stayed closed longer.
Okay, so another national political question. And this is pretty much as Jeff Benish phrased it, and I like it so much, I'll just read it out. I'll paraphrase a little. So Joe Biden is leading by double digits nationally, and he is ahead in all battleground states. So how can the Democrats blow this?
Wow, what a phrase. Okay, that is a little tough. I can tell that there was IPA involved in that question. So I would say that political winds are fickle, and we know that the pollsters are maybe even overcompensating. They've recalibrated. They're not going to make the mistakes of 2016. I have a little more faith than most people in the polls. But of course, if we don't turn out to vote, if we don't have energy, I think energy, I just want to look at 2 positives for Trump that we have to be mindful of, because those are kind of like, the sleeping bear that could come out depending on circumstances. One is the energy remains strong. I know we all threw a party when we saw his rally in Tulsa, people yawning and the room not full, but the polls would suggest that the energy among his base continues to be strong. And I think we have to count on that being true. The other thing is people still trust him. When you dig into those poll numbers, they still trust him on the economy more than they trust Biden, which don't ask me to explain that logic because I don't get it. I think it's some sort of veneer of the businessman still seems appealing, but I think those are the two sort of big scaries in his numbers that Democrats need to be mindful of. But I would like to sort of end the answer to that question on a high note. And you mentioned the Biden head-to-head with Trump, and those are very positive numbers. The one that gives me the most energy and the most comfort is his approve, disapprove. Because the delta, if you take it like the Real Clear Politics average, so no one single poll, but the distance between his disapprove number, which I believe is like right around 56, and his approval number, which is right around 40.5, that's a huge cavernous gulf. That is among the lowest approval numbers and the highest disapproval numbers of his entire tenure as president. And so that, to me, the fact is people are saying not him. And as we know, he's the incumbent. You have to disqualify the incumbent before you can make your case as a challenger, as Joe Biden will do. And so those numbers look good for Democrats.
Okay. So continuing on the national stage, another Jeff Benish special question, which I'm going to break in two parts. He gave it to me in one, but he assumed something that I don't think is something we can just assume. A, did Vladimir Putin win the election for Trump? And B, is he going to do it again in 2020?
Oh, defeat had 1,000 fathers in 2016. Did he not? So many things, but certainly, I don't think you can have, multiple intelligence agencies talking about what happened, and the discord continues today. So yes, certainly one of the fathers was Vladimir Putin. And then the second part of your question was, will he do the same?
Yeah.
I think Putin has been successful. I think his operation continues to morph. I think the anemic response of the tech companies like Facebook is troubling. And the fact is we don't have both houses of Congress to put a stop to that. So I do think that it will have impact. And I think that would go back to your previous question of how are we going to mess this up? Well, the winds will, and the forces against us will be extremely strong. Okay, so let's go local for a moment. You were a big supporter of SDSU West. Now that it's on its way, what do you think about it? I think it's great. I was glad that, I thought I saw Councilmember Jen Campbell on, but I just think the tremendous work of the city council and our Democrats like Dr. Jen really carried it to the finish line. These things can be complicated. They can be difficult, and you've got to get people together and say, let's hammer it out. There has to be a will behind it. So I think it moves forward to the state university system. I think, there are still a few labor issues to be resolved. One of my clients is the Labor Council, and I know we need to make sure that we're hiring local workers. We need to make on the entire property, and we need to make sure that those workers are paid a prevailing wage, and that it is contributing to middle-class jobs in our region. Okay, thank you very much for your insight and also for your patience with our fumbling technology. And all right, so let's see, our next speaker is Michael Smolens from the Union-Tribune. And so I'm going to see if he is up and available. Typing. Yes, he is muted, so I'm going to ask to unmute. Try that one more time. Ah, there we are.
Hello there.
Hello, Michael. Hello.
Oh, you didn't hear me the first time? Hi, Mitch.
I didn't, but I heard you well now.
Okay.
So you've had a few really good columns.
Oh, thank you.
Coming up in the pipeline recently. Let's start by getting some perspective from you on the issue of community-oriented policing. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I guess of what marginal value I may add to the discussion in this town is that I've been around for a long time. And I wasn't, involved in covering law enforcement back when in the heyday of community-oriented policing. But it's just interesting because San Diego, as some of you may recall, and those that you don't, this really, for lack of better description, it's sort of like, the updating the old cop on the beat. Police officer would really be assigned to get really embedded in a community, in a neighborhood, get to know the leaders, get to know the people, and understand how it works to try to help prevent crime and keep, things copacetic. That fell out of favor after a while, but San Diego was sort of at the cutting edge, and a lot of police departments across the nation adopted that plan for a while. But things have changed. Now, in the current climate, people are really looking at, okay, what are we doing in terms of our policing, and is this the best way to go? We've been hearing for years about concerns over racial disparities in stops, traffic stops, and so forth. That hasn't really resonated, I think, with the general public until now that we've seen these larger issues, and people beyond the minorities affected, frankly, are demanding some accountability. So those things are starting to change. Whether they go back to a community-oriented policing, I think that one of the things that's going to have to happen is they're going to have to rebuild some trust. There's really a lack of trust. Some of it might not be warranted, but I think a lot is, particularly in certain communities. So just to start, putting in community relations approaches without kind of somehow building some more credibility is really a concern for the police department.
Okay, so you found some interesting evidence or insights into militarization and police recruitment.
Well, just in the course of all this, I think it started with, I talked with Norm Stamper. Now, again, some old timers may remember who Norm Stamper was. He was the #2 person in the police department. He really was sort of the godfather of community policing. He expected to be chief and lost out to Jerry Sanders. That really sort of hurt him, but he got over it and actually expressed a lot of admiration for Jerry Sanders. I spoke with Norm Stamper, and locally he's kind of, they loved him or hated him. Some thought he was too much of a pacifist officer with the community policing. Others thought that was the wave of the future. But he thought the big changes came with two things. One, the drug war, which was, the tactics just sort of changed, and a lot of low level drug crimes, they were using big battering rams and things like that in the tactics. The other is, and it sort of dovetails with that, the militarization of police. At the same time, police departments were getting access to, surplus military hardware. Some of it, a lot of people questioned, do they really need that? And so a lot of the focus went in that direction. What I found out, frankly, a friend told me that, said you should take a look at the city recruitment video. And it's almost more militarized than the US Army recruitment videos. I mean, it's all about SWAT, and just the whole tone is very crisis, kind of action oriented. Whereas I noticed other police departments throughout the county, the big ones anyway, that have budgets to do this, did videos that were more balanced. Everybody has a SWAT take in their video, but a lot of it had a lot more of community relations, and actually some promotion of the city and so forth. So it just was sort of telling, I thought, that the city of San Diego, in its concern about having low staffing for its budgeted staff, took that approach, that they were looking for action-oriented people and frankly, people with military background, which they always have and police departments have. We'll see if that starts changing at all.
Yeah, I mean, people with military background often understand very well, are at the top of understanding what the difference is between the military mission and the police mission.
Well, one little sidelight, some time ago, not that long ago, the county grand jury reviewed all these recommendations that this federal task force had made for the city. And one of the things the grand jury said that they should really sort of de-emphasize their focus on hiring military veterans. Boy, in this town, as you can imagine, that struck a nerve. And that was one thing that the police hierarchy really rejected and frankly found insulting. I don't think you're ever going to do that, but I think that looking for that experience dovetailed with the kind of selling approach that they have raised some red flags for some folks.
Yeah. Anyway, let's shift gears a little bit. Are we gonna have any fun this summer during the pandemic, or are we just gonna be watching more Netflix until it gets cool again?
Well, I think part of the problem is people have been having some fun that they shouldn't have had. It's been a very difficult situation because the assessments of what we should be doing have changed over time. I mean, let's remember, experts were sort of poo-pooing wearing masks, and now everybody's saying just how many, thousands of lives, if not, tens of thousands of lives we would be saving in the long haul if people had been wearing masks and social distancing. I think it was very evident from the beginning when they started opening things up and allowing people to get outside and so forth. I mean, I live near the beach. I'm a surf bum. And it pained me not to go surfing for that while they, totally closed the beach. But once they reopened the beach and Sunset Cliffs, in a lot of cases, in places, it looked very much like it normally did, even though people were supposed to keep moving, they're supposed to keep their distance. And of course, you saw that immediately when, social establishments, bars and restaurants opened. It was back to normal for everybody, and people were over it, and we've realized, sadly, that we're not. So, to answer your question, I think that people are still going to be going out for bike rides and stuff. The real question is, have individuals gotten the message? Because that's what it's going to take. And are they going to start being more forceful in citing individuals? Frankly,
yeah, it's hard to see what the future is going to hold with that. Another uncertain topic is the recession. What are you seeing going on with the economy here in San Diego at this point?
Well, I think Laura hit on a pressure that all public officials are facing. I mean, it is this balance of, trying to protect public health, but, find ways to reopen in ways that can do that to a reasonable extent. You can't do it, 100%. But, let's face it, people are hurting. And Scott Lewis earlier talked about, schools and how so little is really being focused on that. And that's kind of the bedrock of the economy, not just for the future, but for the parents and being able to work. The city and Dr. Jen Campbell can, I'm sure, address this, but, kind of dodge the bullet. I mean, the budget is not good compared to other budgets, but given the federal money that came in, I mean, the kind of cuts they were looking at were really huge. That's not going to happen next time. And there will be a next time, because this isn't going to end anytime soon. So, I hate to be a pessimistic. July 4th weekend's coming up, and we'll all have to behave in a certain way. But I really sort of fear that we don't really know what's coming come the fall and winter. And I think it's going to be worse, and it's going to get darker before it gets lighter again.
Yeah, this whole experience has been an exercise in stoicism and the value of just, if things are going well for you in the moment, go with that, because you don't know what's going to happen. None of us do. Now, one of the things that we are seeing that President Trump is taking very seriously is building that border wall.
Well, yes, he is. Nothing has changed that. And frankly, it looks like he's been expediting that. I mean, I find it remarkable that, the private property rights folks haven't really gotten too involved in what's happening in Texas in particular, where there's all sorts of eminent domain proceedings, and these basically small farmers and people that have owned land for generations are, being pushed off it. They'll be compensated, but you know how that works sometimes. But yeah, he's moving along. This has been, his calling card for the entire campaign. They're getting the numbers as to how much will actually be built by the time, the election comes around. How much that's going to make a difference at this stage? I mean, I think it was a big, important point for his campaign. I think what the economy is going to be like and what the health of the public is going to be like with the pandemic is just going to override even that, which has been his priority.
Yeah. So on a local level, with the police protests, do you have any insights to share on that? Looks like you do.
Well, I think, as Scott had mentioned earlier, there's been, I don't want to say a sea change, but it's been really remarkable about what's happened. And again, I'll defer to Dr. Campbell and council members, but, the city had been working for years and basically flummoxed as to how they can staff up the police department. And then finally, through various, promotion and pay raises, they seem to be making some headway. Of course, the pay raises were a big part of why they approved this, increased budget. Now everybody's talking about reducing the size of the police department, or reducing its funding. Parenthetically, I think that the phrase defund the police is the worst political term on the face of the earth, because that scares a lot of people off, and most people, that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about readjusting funds. And I noticed that even though that didn't happen when the city budget was first approved, there's subsequent actions that they're taking. I know council member Monica Montgomery is trying to reopen certain things to see if money can be shifted around. Are the votes there? I don't know. And certainly the mayor, unless there's 6 votes there, probably wouldn't stand for that because he wants that budget. But it is sort of interesting that she clearly, is feeling the pressure and the desire, frankly, to do something sooner than later. It looked like that was going to be something put off. So we'll see where that ends up. But I think you're seeing this whole movement towards that. And, if done properly, police for the longest time have said, we shouldn't be doing a lot of this stuff. We're doing a lot of social service kind of work, and we should be supporting that, but we shouldn't be doing that. I mentioned Jerry Sanders when he was chief. At times he suggested certain parts of the police budget, not a lot, but should be shifted to other uses. So it's happened before.
Okay. All right. I guess that would do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
us. Okay, so we're scheduled to have Harry Littman here with us now, but I think we ran into some scheduling difficulties there. So my regrets that we can't have Harry with us. And if Professor Littman is here, please send a direct message to me or to one of our co-hosts, and we'll get you on. Moving onward to a double header, Dr. Jen Campbell and Marni von Wilpert. So I'm going to press some buttons here and make sure they can speak. Let's see, Jennifer Campbell. You're already live, good. And Marni Wilpert.
I'm here, hi.
Hey, you're both here. All right, so I think the way we're gonna do this is that, Jen, you were gonna go first? Is that how we wanna do this? All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself before we begin.
Well, I think your club knows me pretty well, and I'm very happy to be here again with you. And I just want to tell you, thank you for having me, and thank you for inviting Marni. I am the city council member in San Diego for District 2, which is the beach communities mostly, except for La Jolla. And I am just so pleased that Marni von Wilpert is running for District 5 City Council here in San Diego. Mark Kersey, who used to be Republican, now says he's an independent, has changed his registration. He will be termed out, and hopefully we will have Marni to replace him. Marni is a wonderful Democrat, and she is a city attorney, assistant city attorney. And because of that, she knows the city well already, and she knows the council well. And that will help tremendously, because the minute she gets on council, she will be off and running. And she's a great Democrat. She's a wonderful person. She has devoted her life to public service. As soon as she got out of college, she was deployed to Africa with the Peace Corps. And after that, she came home and went to law school and deployed herself to Mississippi, where she ran a civil rights attorney's office and helped the poor people of Mississippi. And then finally came home back to where she was raised, here in San Diego, and has been an attorney here. We are so lucky to have her. And I just, her specialty in the city attorney's office is homelessness. That is one of my top priorities, is resolving homelessness. And I know that we can work together well. I know she's spot on, she's brilliant, she's wonderful, and she's very humble. But I want to tell you that we are so lucky to have such a great Democratic candidate. And I want everybody out there to pitch in and help her to get elected, because man, we need her on city council, and I need her also. So thank you so much for allowing her to come and speak, and let her take over at this point.
Take it away, Marni von Wilpert.
All right, Dr. Jen, thank you so much for that fabulous introduction. I don't think I need to say anything else at this point. I think my job is done. I can go home. I appreciate you. Dr. Jen has actually been an amazing help and mentor on the campaign trail, and was one of my first people to endorse. So thank you very much. And thank you to the La Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club for having me tonight. This club has done incredible things like getting Marty Emerald elected, Colin Parent, La Mesa, Akila Weber. I talked to Raul quite a bit because he is a deputy city attorney too, and he's grateful for all of your help. Rancho Bernardo, Scripps Ranch, Call Mountain isn't all that different some places from Spring Valley and Hamul. And you guys have flipped all of that, and we're going to flip here in District 5 too. So I'll tell you a little about myself, and I'm happy to do some Q&A, but I grew up here in Scripps Ranch. And as Dr. Jen said, I am now a deputy city attorney at the city attorney's office. My job is I'm a civil prosecutor. So I go after people and businesses that harm San Diegans. I prosecute environmental polluters for my job. You might have seen the big Monsanto settlement that our office just announced recently to get money back to the city for a lot of cleanup efforts. I also prosecuting the opioid industry on behalf of the city of San Diego for their fraudulent marketing as these non-addictive drugs, which we now know they were not non-addictive. I am also going after folks who harm senior citizens, businesses who don't pay their workers. We recently had a big lawsuit, a big lift against Uber and Lyft for misclassifying their drivers, independent contractors. And I love my job, it's amazing. But I'm running for city council because I don't want to wait for cases to come to me anymore. I want to be proactive and in the community and asking people what they need and helping solve problems with the law. So after Scripps Ranch High School, I was one of the first classes to graduate from Scripps High back in 2001. I then went to UC Berkeley for college, and 2 weeks into my freshman year of college was my very first election. I got elected dorm president. And also 2 weeks in though, 9/11 hit, and that changed everything for us. My first job as dorm president was to go door to door and knock on every student's door and ask if they were okay, tell them the campus had been shut down. Our fellow students who were ROTC members were no longer college students. They were getting ready to go to a war abroad in Iraq and Afghanistan. I decided after college to jump in the fight a little bit differently and represent the United States abroad. And I joined the Peace Corps, and I served in Botswana in sub-Saharan Africa for 2 years. This is actually the second epidemic I've been through in my life. I was in the height of the AIDS epidemic in sub-Saharan Africa. My job was as a social worker to take care of children who were born with HIV, whose parents had largely died of AIDS. And I've done contact tracing and testing, and I know why it works, and I know how it can help keep our society and economy going. I loved my job. I could protect these kids from a lot. I could get them drugs they needed, medication, food and clothing, but I couldn't protect the kids I worked with in Botswana from the stigma and discrimination they would face their whole life because of a medical condition. And when I saw them get expelled from school when they were 12 years old in 6th grade because they'd start to show the Kaposi sarcoma or purple blotches or any other symptom of HIV, they'd have to start looking for work at 13 years old. And I thought, that's not right. I just don't know how to fix this. I'm not a lawyer. So I decided to become a lawyer because of this. But I had no running water or electricity in my village. So I had to hitchhike 2.5 hours into town to find the internet. I would type out my law school application essays there, and my mother in San Diego would print them out and mail them to law schools around the country for me. And that's how I found out. I got into Fordham Law School in New York City. I love being a lawyer. It's one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. And then I moved straight to Mississippi to open a civil rights clinic. Like Dr. Jen said, I got a $100,000 grant from Skadden Arps, a very prominent law firm in this country, to give back and to do what I'd done abroad in the Peace Corps back home in my own country. We helped folks who were LGBTQ and faced discrimination, folks who had HIV and faced discrimination based on race as well, and other access to justice issues. And the clinic I opened is still running to this day. I just couldn't live in Mississippi forever. I was there for 3 years. My haircut was a huge problem. I can tell you all about that sometime. It's a very conservative place, but I then moved to Washington, D.C. and worked for President Obama for 3 years at the National Labor Relations Board, enforcing workers' rights all throughout the country, especially women's rights to equal pay on the job.
Okay, I'm just going to jump in and interrupt you.
Okay.
I have, because we're running short on time, I do have a strange question for you, which is, where in Botswana were you?
I was in Mokobilo, which is a village in the middle of nowhere.
My wife and I visited Botswana and Namibia a year ago this month, and it was a wonderful trip. So we will talk about that offline because we are limited for time here. And I want to hear about what you're going to do for San Diego. What are the big issues in your district, and what are you going to do about them?
Okay, well, some of the big issues that we're working on are the COVID issues, obviously, and making sure people stay healthy. I strongly believe that we can both take care of public health, and that will help us reopen our economy if we do the right things, like wearing masks, like social distancing, like opening up how we need to. I think our economy can be stronger. If San Diego can be the safe tourist town to come to our economy will start before others will. But COVID also presents special considerations for my district because of fire issues. So CAL FIRE has just started to alert people about the fire season coming up. I've been meeting with our Scripps Ranch Fire Safety Council and our fire department here in San Diego to plan for what we have to do for a mass evacuation in a time of COVID. We can't just stuff everybody into a high school gym anymore. We need to do health checks, temperature checks, where keep people going to go. So we're already planning for that and how to keep our firefighters safe. And we had 2 massive fires in my district, so that's a big deal for us. Also making sure that we work on tackling our homelessness issues and housing affordability issues. I mean, even though we are in a pandemic, these issues still exist and we need to make sure we do a better job with them. As Dr. Jen said, I work on them at the city attorney's office, and I helped already change a lot of police protocol around interacting with homeless individuals when it comes to encroachment on the public right of way, and helped open another transitional storage facility. We need to do a lot better than storage facilities, but it's always a start. Same thing with making sure we also meet our sustainability goals. That's a big reason I'm running for office, is to make sure that we tackle climate change. And we're going to have to restart our economy, especially with infrastructure projects and public works projects. We have the Pure Water project coming in, which will help a whole lot of residents in San Diego. A big part of it will be in my district at Lake Miramar, which is down the street from where I live in Scripps Ranch. Same thing with our San Diego Community Power. We've got to get that entity up and running right. So that's a big deal to me. And I'm running for city council because I believe in this city and I love it. I want to see it thrive. I'm running because I believe that we have to take care of the environment for the next generation. I'm running to make sure that everyone can afford to put a roof over their head in San Diego and access to jobs and education that can help them get there. And I'm running because I believe that no matter where you're from, where you're born, what you look like, what gender you are, who you love, you deserve to be treated with dignity and respect and equality, and you deserve a government that promotes that. So I'm happy to keep talking.
Great. So final question for you. What can we help you do to win this election in the swing district?
Yes. Mitch, if you actually would let me share my screen, I have 4 slides I can show you that will help.
We have about a minute, so
that's okay. I can go through in a minute.
Well, I'm gonna have to say no to that, basically because I don't want to be sitting here pressing buttons because I don't quite know how to enable screen sharing. Let's just talk.
Okay, that's all right. That's all right. I was going to show you the voter registration data and our path to winning. But it's flipped. District 5 has flipped. It's now primarily Democrat, and it's growing more and more. However, it's going to come down to voter contact. And I came in first place in the primary, which is the first time ever a Democrat has come first place in the primary in District 5, and there was another Dem in the race. So I think we have a strong chance. However, my district is the only one left where we have a very, very competitive race between one of the only Republicans left standing and me. I know in D7 we have a race too, but the voter registration is so much better for Raul there. So I need your help. Talking to voters is huge. We can't knock as many doors as we could. We knocked on over 20,000 doors in the primary, but we'll need to phone bank, we'll need to do lit drop and virtual house meetings. So anyone you can put me in contact with and word of mouth, if you can tell folks you know in District 5 about me, that'd be extremely helpful. So, and a lot of you on this call, I'm seeing you help me meet my fundraising goal last night. So thank you. We actually exceeded our fundraising goal by a lot. So I really appreciate everyone's help.
That's great. What's the email address for your campaign? I'll type it into the chat if you say it.
Yes, it is Marni at marnivonwilpert.com. And my website is marni4forsandiego.com.
I'm looking up the spelling on your name, so I'm not doing it.
Marni. I know it's hard. Don't worry. But
marnivonwilpert.com, and it's what's the website URL?
www.marni4forsandiego.com. So, and we're doing postcard writing. We have other volunteer opportunities, so please feel free to get in touch. I'd love to see you.
Okay, good. So one day when it is possible, we will have to sit down for coffee and talk about Botswana. But for now, yes. I will just thank you for joining us this evening and move on to our next, and I believe final guest is Amar Kampa Najar. Amar, are you with us? Do I need to press buttons here? I will look. So if he's here, he's under another name, a pseudonym.
Looks like he's no longer in here. I can try to send him a message.
That is disappointing. Was he in under Amar Campanajjar? Or was it a different name? Oh, wait, no, Campa Campaign guest. I'm going to say that's it. Still muted.
Awesome.
Hello, Amar.
Hey, how's it going,
Welcome.
Mitch?
Okay, how are you?
Good. Thank you for making time for me. It's good to see all your lovely faces. It's been a while. I finally got a haircut. It was time. I had a big mullet going on, which I haven't had since high school, and it was time to look more congressional.
Yes.
Just wanted to say thank you all for having me. I don't know how much time we do have, but I want to say thank you. I know it's been a while since we all seen each other. There's been a lot going on with COVID-19 and the protests, and it's just beginning to feel like the next 4 months, 17 Tuesdays from now, will be a huge day of reckoning, hopefully. And I think that this moment, as hard as it's been and as tragic as it's been, has forced us as a country to be more self-reflective because we're not in the daily hamster wheel of our lives. And I think that's a healthy thing for our country. And we're beginning to understand on a deeper level the inequities that we experience as a nation. So I have a feeling of gratitude about that because there are some ancient hatreds that still exist in this country, and we're coming to grips with it, I think, finally, in a way that hopefully is meaningful in the end. I've been campaigning the whole time. We've been having telephone town halls, and I've been meeting with small business owners who've been affected and healthcare workers who've been on the front lines serving us. And, you know, COVID-19 is still, you know, pushing, and it keeps going, and it keeps enveloping our community, even if we don't believe it's true. It's one of those things where, you know, fake news and whatever's being spun from the top doesn't change the realities on the ground that 130,000 people have lost their lives as a result of it. 2.6 million people have gotten the coronavirus in this country, and it looks like it's going to be creeping up again. And we're balancing people's lives and livelihoods. I'll give you an example. My great uncle died of COVID-19 last month, and my aunts, his kids, didn't have the money to do a proper funeral and burial because of the economic situation. So it's a really painful, tragic time. And we could only hope that out of this tragedy comes, you know, opportunity and hope and progress. So I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful about the future. I'm hopeful about the next 4 months. We've been working pretty hard. We had a great quarter as of yesterday. Thank you all for donating, not just devoting your time, your labor and love, but donating your dollars. The average donation we got was $19, and we surpassed our goal that the National Party imposed on us by $70,000, which will turn some heads. And I think it's going to help us build the financial war chest that we need to make the case that we deserve somebody who's from the district, who cares about the district. You're not my plan B. You're not my option. You're my priority. And I don't spin conspiracy theories calling the coronavirus a hoax. I'm clear-eyed about what this is. It's affected me and my family. And I think we need to take all precautions necessary to make sure people could live, work, and vote with dignity and security. I mean, right now, me and Isa were fighting about whether or not the universal vote by mail decision by the governor was the right thing to do. I mean, only he would think that that is a problem. More people voting, I think, is a good thing. It's good for our democracy. And it's constitutional because the legislators are going to codify it into law. And it's not, you know, he's concerned about campaign fraud, which is ironic because he's voting in a location that he doesn't live in, his mom's home. So that's kind of fraud. So it's truly ironic, but I'm hopeful. And, you know, all that noise aside, I think that we are at this inflection point in the life of our country. I feel it everywhere. I know that in some ways we feel like we're tearing at the seams, where people who are pro law enforcement or pro community are at odds, but I've seen a lot of great conversations, difficult and long overdue conversations being had all across the district with people I'm talking to, and it gives me hope. I do believe that when you turn off the TV and you stop looking at the news and you start listening to what's happening in dining rooms and living rooms all across our district and our county, the conversations are generating more light than heat. I really believe that. I know it. I've seen it. And I hope that that feeling that I'm hearing around the district will come to fruition on November 3rd. The Supreme Court has reminded us that our country isn't all lost, and that our governing institutions have not completely been undone. And I'm hoping that we could fortify the House and the Senate, and hopefully have a commander-in-chief who will not surrender in the face of a wartime that we're living through. So
Let me, I want to share a thought with you and get your perspective on it and see if I'm crazy or not. That for basically my entire adult life, maybe the entire amount of time that I've been aware of politics, which goes back to the 70s, Democrats and progressives, we used to call ourselves liberals in the old days, the basic strategy has been trying to kind of stop the damage. You know, we've been dealing with a country that's been moving more and more in a conservative direction, and if we could slip in a couple of programs and maybe mitigate harm, that was a good day. And now all of a sudden, in a matter of a couple of months, it seems like we really have an opportunity to all of a sudden enact a progressive agenda that I don't think we've had maybe since JFK or FDR. Mm. So first of all, A, am I nuts? Or are we really seeing that kind of momentum? And B, if there is that kind of momentum, what are you going to do about it if you are fortunate enough to be elected to Congress? What's your reach goal?
Yeah, I mean, those are great questions. No, I don't think you're crazy. I think you're hopeful and you're seeing things the way they are. I've been hearing a lot of folks tell me that when they were around during the civil rights movement, when people were fighting for equality before I was even born, it looked like a monolith when you saw the marches. It was mostly Black men and women. Today, it's a very eclectic, diverse sea of people, and that tells you how far the movement for equality has gone, that it comes in many different shades. And that's a beautiful thing. I think that is a sign of progress. And the silver lining of all this COVID-19 stuff is that it's focused us and transfixed us to focus on what's happening in this moment with racial inequality. And you talked about progressivism. I honestly, personally, as a person, and maybe it's invited the ire of some Democrats, I don't see politics today as a showdown between the left and the right. I think that's a sham. I think it's a showdown between the insiders in Washington, the political class that's been there for time immemorial, who want to preserve the status quo, and those of us who are the outsiders who want to disrupt, or they call drain the swamp. Those of us who want to change the status quo because it's clearly not working. That's how I see it. And I think I'll give you a perfect example is people say, if we could go back to a time when things were better. I mean, better for who? Since the original sin of slavery, one of the original sins, there are others, we have continued on this path of structurally undermining African Americans. With the New Deal, they were exempt from FHA loans. You can give loans for low cost housing, or if you were in the military, you didn't benefit from the GI Bill. And I think the New Deal was one of the most progressive pieces of legislation ever to be established on American soil, and it still exempted people of color, Black people specifically. So there is no nostalgia about who we are in the past. America has always been striving to be more in alignment with its highest ideals. For the past couple of years, in some areas, we have veered further away from that than before. So it does feel like people are finally just getting upset, and they're finally raising their voices, and they're being heard in a way that they haven't been heard. And people not just are speaking up, but for the first time, I think this nation is held captive and is listening. And that's what's so important. Because if you hear about what's happening now, there have been many George Floyds. George Floyd was not the first, and he wasn't even the last in the past couple of weeks to suffer the way he suffered and die the way that he died brutally. But people are finally paying attention. And I think that's the difference. But the only net result, the only way this all matters, otherwise we're just, we're screaming in the darkness and we're rattling the gates of hell with the key locked in the inside, is if we elect people who want to make laws in the image of people who have been discriminated against and give them a voice. because for time immemorial, it's been the corporate elites, it's been the people in power who hold the status quo. We have to elect people that will change the status quo. Otherwise, this is just a moment and not a movement. And what I hope to do in Congress are very common sense things. We need national standards for, and I have a 10-point plan. If you go to my website or on social media, I put a 10-point plan on what we should do. Some of it's being implemented on the city level already. Some of it could only be implemented on a local level. Is not on a, you could incentivize it federally and financially, but really the change has to happen on a local level. And be very thoughtful about who you advocate for and support. Even the candidates that were here today, help them, donate to them, make sure that you're getting them out there if they support your positions. I personally think, I agree with Smolens. I think this notion of the term, this is when Democrats don't like me, but it's just the truth. The term defund the police is not serving the purpose of trying to get allies in unexpected places like in East County. They don't know what that means. Just like if I just started saying defund Planned Parenthood, everybody here would be like, what are you talking about? That is just an alarmist statement. A lot of people, police officers included, say, I did not sign up to be a social worker. I did not sign up to be a mental health professional. I did not sign up to take care of homeless people. If you want to have somebody that I could escort who could do that job, I'll be happy to see money go from our department to those services. And that's what we're calling for here, right? When people say defund the police. But that's not what people who need to be persuaded of that case are hearing when we say that. So I think it's really important that we talk about that. The problem that exists within Black communities and communities of color is not just funding the police too much. There's over-policing in some areas is the problem, and under-policing is also a problem. So we have to take a measured approach, I believe. And also, this is not a federal issue, but in terms of funding more, getting more money to schools in our cities as opposed to the police department, well, the school districts are the ones that get money directly from the state. Most of the budget that the city deals with, it has not much to do with education. So I think it's important that we get informed on what levers we need to pull to make government work properly. And on the federal level, we can incentivize those who do the right thing, have a federal ban on chokeholds, finally make lynching a hate crime. I cannot believe it's 2020 and we haven't done that. Make sure that we're funding these alternatives to police for mental health and other kinds of 911 calls. And there's a whole host of issues we can do. But that leadership, it does come from the local level. And what we could do on the federal level is provide the right carrots and sticks to make sure that we fix that problem. But while that's happening and while we're dealing with COVID, we're having fire season coming up. I live close to the skyline where the Skyline fire was in Hawaii. I could smell and see the fire. And that's a reality for us. And we have a president who's threatened to take away federal funding for fire relief and fire, being proactive about fire. So we have to fight these things on multiple fronts and call out the president when he's doing the wrong thing. And when he's doing the right thing, which is very rare, if ever these days, try to work with him there. So if I'm in Congress, look, I can't promise you that we're going to win the White House. Democrats will know. I can't promise you that. You asked me what I'm going to do. Mitch, the question is, what are we going to do? I'm the tip of the spear of the candidate. You're the rod driving this thing through. And without you guys, the Mar Camp in a Jar is a confusing name on a ballot that means nothing to people. But you guys give it meaning because you support the movement. But I can't do it all. I can't guarantee that we're going to win the White House. I hope we have some, a change in the Senate. But the House is the only firewall we have to this moment. It hasn't served us perfectly well, but put your mind to what could happen if one party controlled every single aspect of our government, even more so than now. So that's why keeping this seat, flipping it, is so important. I don't look at things typically from a left or right perspective, but you have in Darrell Issa as somebody who's taken every position on every position. He said that we had to investigate Trump, now he's kissing him up. He said that he would be the worst thing for the Republican Party, now he's the best thing for the Republican Party. He said that he wants to defund Planned Parenthood, now in 2018 he said he wants to fund Planned Parenthood. I think in our district, people don't trust someone who's never just put their foot on the ground and said, here's what I stand for. And the reason that we have the problems we have today is because we have elected officials who are bought and sold by the highest bidder, and they want to maintain the status quo. They want to keep
Okay, I'm gonna interrupt you now because we have. I
Sure.
do appreciate the generosity with your time, but
Yep.
we're about out of it. And I do appreciate your coming. We do have one more speaker.
Sure. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Thank
Absolutely.
you. Good luck.
You guys
good
out
luck
there.
in
Take
November.
care. Love you guys.
Okay. All right. So our final speaker tonight, who's only going to be a minute or two, he's very, very important to our membership, Jack Shu, a local member of our club who is here. And Jack, I'm just going to turn it over to you and let
Thank you, Mitch.
address the board for a minute or two.
Thank you, Mitch, for squeezing me at the very end here. So I'm Jack Shu, and this morning I filed papers to be a candidate for one of the seats in the City Council of the City of La Mesa. And many people have asked me to run in the past, and I must say that I didn't want to do it. I'm in retirement, but I felt in the last few weeks that it is time. It is time for us to act and to make a difference from a different place in elected office. So that's what I've chose to do. You're getting a pre-announcement, pre-launch announcement, because you're my club, you're my home, you're my base, and I'm going to rely on all of you to help me. In the next few weeks, I'll be putting together a website, information, materials, printed materials, and then launch before the end of July. And when I launch, I would like all of you to join with me in promoting my name, my candidacy in election to City Council. What I want to bring to the City Council is a different kind of experience. I have experience at the federal, state, and regional level in planning and making a better community. I want to bring that to La Mesa. What I'm also bringing is a sense of integrity, saying the truth. And we've known that even our own elected officials often don't tell the truth, not even our own Democrats. I'm going to make it a point, and as you know, I always tell it like it is, even when it's bad news. And I'm going to bring that to La Mesa because we have to face these serious problems with budget crises, with our law enforcement agencies, and et cetera. I also want to bring equity, a word that I've been fighting for since I was in high school. I believe in justice and diversity, but I also believe in equity, which means sometimes we're going to have to give extra help to certain members of our community. And lastly, I want to bring action. I just finished, and I'm late to this meeting because I was on a task force to bring a police review commission to the city of La Mesa, something that should have happened 5 years ago. In the last year and a half, I've been fighting for that. And of course, because we have a riot and burned banks, all of a sudden the city council says, well, we better move on that quickly. I'm tired of that. I have set forth on that task force an extremely fast timeline to get something going in our emergency review board in the next few weeks, certainly in the next month or so. This task force is only charged to actually question whether or not we should have a police board. That question has long passed. So that's what I bring to you, those aspects. Mitch, thank you for having me. Please help me flip the council. If I'm elected and get Christina Alicio out, we'll have 3 Democrats, 3 liberals, progressive in the city of La Mesa. It's time to move that in East County. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. That does it for tonight's meeting. Thanks to all of you for staying with us, and we hope to see you soon in real life. Until then, you can look for a replay of the meeting on our YouTube channel. Just search for La Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club on YouTube and subscribe while you're there. Also, look for links to the video on our website, Facebook page, and Twitter account, or in our email update, which I plan on sending out tomorrow, but might slip till the weekend. The website is lamesafoothillsdemocraticClub.com, or if that's too much for you to type, LMFDems. The Facebook page is also the name of the club. On Twitter, we're LMFDems. And if you want to sign up for our email updates, go to the website and look for the Get Email Updates link at the top of the page. I want to say a special thanks to Jeff Benish, our VP of Programming, for lining up this excellent roster of guests and providing me with necessary background information and questions to help bring out the best in all of our speakers. And I also want to thank the board, particularly Evelyn Andrade and Katie Seghetti, who helped run the meeting behind the scenes. And thank you to our entire board and to all of you for coming, and to our speakers tonight. Good night, everybody. Stay healthy, stay sane, and vote blue no matter who.